You've said that the central error of pornography is that it tells the lie that women think about sex the way men do. As a romance novelist yourself, and it cracks me up that I say that, you, the romance novelist.
I've been that novelist for about 8 weeks now.
As a romance novelist
From my
yourself,
vast experience as a romance novelist.
Have you had any business cards made yet?
No, I have not.
As a romance novelist yourself, would you say that romance novels generally teach women to make a similar error? If so, was this something you were actively working against when you wrote your novel?
Yes. First, I think the comparison is apt, right? I think that the romance novel genre as a whole, I think is porn for the emotions. I think it's emotional porn. And it's either lamenting the fact that men don't think about the emotional relationship the way women do, or getting them to come around to the fact that they really do. And then they get in touch with their feelings and fade to black. They kiss and fade to black. That is men are not like that. And just as the women are not the way they're portrayed in pornography, so also real life women are not like that. So also real life men are not like that. And so men step into an imaginary world where all the women have men's brains and women's bodies, right? But they're ready to go, just like the men are. And the women step into an imaginary fictional world where the men have men's bodies but women's brains, or the capacity to think like a woman, or to emote like a woman, or to be your best girlfriend, right? And so yes, I think that the comparison is apt. I think not only that, I think that romance novels are far more dangerous in this regard than pornography, because Christian men who look at porn, view porn, use porn, know that it's a problem, and they know the nature of the problem, and there's some self-delusion involved, but there's not delusion usually about what's going on, right? But women can roar through a stack of romance novels and think that it's nothing but innocent fun, right? Nobody's got their guard up, right? And it wreaks havoc in a lot of relationships, because just like a guy addicted to porn starts comparing his wife to these actresses or porn stars, and he's comparing her negatively, well, that's going to cause problems. Well, if the wife is on the steady diet of Baron so-and-so and Lord Heathcliff and all of that stuff, and a steady diet of how they the Mr. Darcy problem, when it comes right down to it, Bob, you're no Mr. Darcy, and that causes problems. My mom, now with the Lord, used to say comparisons are odious, and fiction that does the job that fiction ought to do ought to equip you and inspire you and ennoble you to do what you ought to be doing. It ought not to give you fodder to compare other people negatively over against some prototype.
So I know it's been a while, but I've heard you teach on this before, and noting how for all of our current culture's infatuation with diversity, the homosexual agenda has at the root of it same, sir. Yeah. So men with men is same. Women with women is same. And it's heterosexuality that puts actual diversity at the root of it, where a man has to actually submit his desires to somebody who's totally different, and she likewise. But it does seem like in our culture right now, there is despite the fact that we're all about same, the idea that men need to submit to women does actually have a lot of cultural sway right now. But going the other direction, that a woman's expectations for her husband, that she needs to actually submit to a masculinity, that seems like
That's a no-fly zone.
Yeah, going to an earlier question that we talked about back a little bit about the pulpit being a place that it takes courage. I would think preaching that sermon would take a serious spine.
Yes, I recently tweeted something like anybody who believes that, who goes on and on and on about servant leadership, and oh yeah, that's what I want as a servant leader. Well, why don't we call it servant lordship? Why don't we call it servant ruler? Why don't we call the men servant rulers? Well, if you want to cause a stir in your congregation, try jumping on that hand grenade, Mr. Servant Leader. You're giving yourself basically. We need to understand that God wants men to, yes, lead, but that's our softened version of it, whenever we use a word like patriarchy, we want to rush to say, no, I'm not talking about Ezekiel one-tooth living up in the mountains, right? But basically, patriarchy simply means father rule, and there's a head. Every household unit has a head, and that head is the husband, the husband, the father, and of course he ought not to be a jerk. Of course he ought to listen to his wife. Of course she ought to be his first and best counselor. Of course, but there are all sorts of situations where, when it's all said and done, she's counseling, I don't think we ought to take this job, and he thinks, right? At some point, somebody makes a decision.
Yeah.
Right? And the other person submits to that decision, and the Bible is unambiguously clear that the head makes the decision. The head is responsible to be the head.